All right, so there are a few differences between your cool lights and your warm lights, right? So the cool lights typically are going to be like fluorescent lights, like well, these are kind of warmer LEDs, but in the old school days, back like 5-10 years ago, we used to have these like fluorescent tube lights that you would see in your schools back in the day. But those are typically going to be a much harsher, cooler light, and that's because it's for task lighting. It's actually it's harsher in the sense that it's brighter, but it's easier on the eyes when you're trying to focus on something that light's being reflected off of. That's why you always hear your mom and dad saying turn on the lights when you're trying to read, right? Because if you try to read when it's dark, then you're straining your eyes in order to pull more light in. So there is a very good use for warmer light as well. It tends to soften really intense graphics and geometry that we're looking at, even when it's in an environment that is predominantly or that is dominated by cooler light. So what I want to kind of bring up is sort of a suggestion. A suggestion for you, I guess, in your studios as well as in professional lighting design. But I'm having a tough time finding the right product here. Well, this is... Hang on. Well, it's a really small picture, but you've all seen that lamp, right? This lamp is, the format you've probably seen it is it just has a simple incandescent or nowadays an LED bulb that screws into the middle of it. Well, they actually make some really nifty versions of this where it'll have either soft and cool color temperature LED lights, for being environmentally friendly and all that, or it'll have an incandescent light in the center with a fluorescent light around it. And what that's meant to do is to start giving you enough light that you can see what it is you're working on, and also soften the really intense graphics if you're dealing with a fluorescent task light or a cool light source for your task light. But nowadays with LEDs, it's kind of, it's one color temperature anyway. They just blend the influence and make it somewhere in the middle range. So we don't really have to worry about it so much anymore. But the point I'm trying to make is using cool lights and warm lights in your environment is going to be tremendously beneficial. So when we went through that draft that I showed you before, which I didn't save unfortunately, I put warm lights going up and cool lights going down. That isn't necessarily indicative of anything that I meant for a design decision, but what I would like to, I guess, specify is that ambient lighting and sort of just filling up the room, you tend to want to use cooler lights. If you're trying to create task lighting or feature lighting, then you want to try to use, did I say cooler lights? I meant warmer lights. Your ambient lighting should be warmer lights, and your task lighting and feature lighting should be more on a cool spectrum. But that's not in all cases, that's just in most cases as a baseline. And then your design decisions will pull you this way or that way, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to take a quick moment to just, and I don't like shaded viewport here real quick. I'm going to take a quick moment to just model in, I guess, a couple of different types of lights that you might want to consider in your space that would relate to that particular kind of element. So I have these down lights. I'm just real quickly going to pull some up to the top, sort of. It's really lagging on me today. Well, I lost it. Let's select these. Select objects. So I'm just trying to get a couple in place so that you can see some differences in the type of lighting that you might want to start using. So if you put my task lights are going to be the cool lights that are going to be up top, and I'm not going to have these down here. Whoops. This computer is exceptionally slow today, so if it's annoying to watch, I apologize. And let me just double check what my light source was. Emitter is warm, and emitter 2 is cool, so I want to, yeah, emitter 2 is good on that. And my warm lights are these, which are going up. That's good. So I'm actually going to get rid of these in the middle, because I think what I want to do is just create a singular source that's going to help illuminate that interior space, and then have the task lights be the only active lights that are in this space. Set my view again, sorry. There we go. So the way I'm going to do that is, well, there are a couple of things I could do. I can actually put like a point light, or just, you know, start to mess with the ambient lighting in that particular space. But I think what I'd prefer to do is work through just basically playing with the camera, right? So I'm going to put a light that just happens to exist behind the camera. The reason is, when I light a space, what I've found to be most successful is to essentially act like your model is almost like a studio model. You would light it like it's a small object in a space. So you use external lighting to set the scene. It's a little bit easier to control than the environmental settings, in my opinion, for interior spaces. So, so I'm really just going to go to, I guess it would be my front view here. And I'm going to create a 4-point surface. It doesn't really matter how big that 4-point surface is, as long as it spans across your actual space there. All right, so if I zoomed out on this, you would see it like that. And just pull it back a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but actually, I'm cutting it pretty far forward. Let me make sure this is showing in perspective, like that. Yeah. So there it is there. I'll pull it back to about there. Okay. So this particular surface then is going to become sort of my ambient light source, or so I'm hoping. So I'm going to check that that's facing the right direction. It is. Let me put that on the uplights layer, which was my warm light layer, and then I'll just do a draft render. Now I might need to play with this later because those lights are sort of the same intensity and same settings, but we'll see. So let me just make sure I've got everything set up properly here. Okay, let's do it. I'll pause for a moment while that runs. Well, anyway, so the comparison is kind of like this, and now I'm just doing this to close out the video, so I'm repeating myself a little bit. So you've got cool task lighting, warm ambient lighting, that's calibrated in order to capture the particular essence of a scene that you're trying to create. So we're trying to do the same thing here, and you can't really see it, unfortunately. I probably needed to bump my emitter up quite a bit, but you can see some sort of warm colors are starting to make their impact on the surfaces here. And then you've got sort of these cool influences that are coming in from the outer environment and then our inner environment as well. I probably need to bump up those emitters as well. They're not really shining the way I wanted them to, but I probably have some setting wrong. Anyway, so I want you guys to be thinking about setting the scene, because the next stage here is going to be developing whatever this thing is that's in our space, and we're actually going to be focusing light on it. Okay, so just take that in for a moment while I sort of reset, and we're going to get into a few other things.